So, hello everyone, and welcome back to another fertility expert interview as part of our new series for this year. Today we have Jen from Element Pilates and Yoga, and she's going to be telling us all about the differences between normal yoga and fertility yoga and the benefits that this can have for you both physically and emotionally while you are trying to get pregnant. So, Jennifer is a yoga, Pilates, meditation, and breathwork teacher. With over 15 years' experience, she specialises in fertility and women's health. During a long and difficult fertility journey of her own, Jennifer eventually found the practice of fertility yoga. This practice was able to ease her anxiety while trying to conceive, relieve chronic insomnia, rebalance a thyroid condition, and eventually it helped her to fall pregnant naturally. She now runs an online business, Element Pilates and Yoga, helping women all over the world to overcome fertility challenges and find their way to motherhood. She is the host of the Your Journey to Fertility podcast and the founder of the In Your Element Fertility Yoga program. Jen, welcome to the
I'm so happy to be here, Naomi. Thank you so much for having me. I absolutely love chatting to you, and this is always just like catching up with an old friend.
I think that's the joy, isn't it? When you work in a similar field to someone or the same field, and your passions align, and the work we do is quite similar in terms of like supporting women when they're in a very vulnerable stage in their lives, and sort of guiding them through and supporting them into motherhood. So yeah, I think we met at the beginning of last year and we've been collaborating and supporting each other. So it's lovely to have you on the podcast to share today. So I obviously in the introduction talked a little bit about your journey and how you got into this field, but tell us in more detail, why are you so passionate about the work you do and what led you to it?
It is a long story, so we'll do the abridged version. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. So my journey starts when I got married when I was 33, and we were really excited to start a family straight away. We were, relatively young, we're healthy. We had no cause to think that we'd have any trouble conceiving our family. So I went off birth control and my cycle never came back. And it was months and months of waiting and appointments and being told to wait more. And it got to about the 18-month mark and we thought, this isn't great. This isn't looking good. So more testing. We tried colombiad letrozole. Nothing could get my cycle to kickstart. So the first fertility doctor that we went to see told me I had gone through early menopause. So that's not what you want to hear when you are 34. So pretty much we were told straight away the only option for you is IVF. We don't really know what else to do. You can give this a go. So we thought, okay, we'd been on this journey for 18 months without even being able to try to conceive, right? We couldn't even get out of the starting blocks. So we thought, look, we know that IVF is like the big guns. Let's just do it. Let's have our baby. Let's go. But it wasn't successful. And it was a terrible round, actually. We got 0 embryos. So it was like we couldn't even try IVF. So we were left in a place where we were, pretty miserable. We thought that maybe this just wasn't going to happen for us. And I was living overseas at the time. I was living in Southeast Asia. And I'd had a few friends back in Australia who had worked with a particular fertility doctor who'd been wonderful and really helpful with them. So I decided to fly back to Sydney and do a round with her. I also worked with a fertility naturopath for a few months before that to see if I could improve things. And again, it was not a great round, but we did end up with one little embryo, and she made it all the way. So that was my first fertility journey. And that little girl is now 6.5 years old.
Mm.
And, we were so excited and we thought, look, we want to have another baby. We've always wanted to have 2 children. When she was about a year, we decided, we'd think about going back to IVF. But the most amazing thing happened. After I stopped breastfeeding, my cycle returned. My period just showed up one day and it was regular and my cycle was super normal. We couldn't believe our luck. The doctors were wrong. I hadn't gone through menopause. We thought this was the one thing we needed. Sadly, that wasn't really how it worked out. It ended up being a much longer and much more difficult journey than the first for many reasons. So, we thought this was going to be a piece of cake. We
Yeah.
tried naturally at home for about kind of 6 months or so. Nothing happened. I was 37 by this stage. So we were living in the Middle East by now. And so I went to a new clinic who said, look, your hormone levels aren't amazing. They're average for your age. But look, you are ovulating. Your cycle's regular. Just keep trying. Those words I've heard so many times. Another
Just
six
for
months
another
go
8 years, you'll be fine. You're like,
Come on, mate. Like, so we did a bit more testing. We did try naturally for a bit longer, but I ended up being diagnosed with a thyroid condition. I found out my fallopian tubes were partially blocked, and we ended up with some male factor issues as well. So, coupled with my age and all of those things, we were sent back to IVF. And I was so disappointed, but I thought, look, it worked last time. We just need that one embryo. Let's get on with it, and we'll just get this story and get past this stage in our lives. So we went back to IVF and things didn't work out. And the last transfer that we did after that last cycle we did was in March of 2020. And the next day we went into lockdown over COVID. And for anyone who went through fertility treatments in 2020 would know all of the clinics shut down because they were considered non-essential surgeries. So I couldn't go to work. I couldn't go back to trying IVF. I was just at home thinking that that was pretty much the end of our journey. And I had developed chronic insomnia throughout this process. I look back now and it's no surprise that I didn't fall pregnant. I was being pumped full of so many hormones. I was taking thyroid medication, progesterone. I was put on Ambien and Valium to help me get to sleep at night. I was just a mess, complete mess. And when I was left in this place of, well, there's no other options, I didn't know what to do. And it was so weird, like the things that the universe throws at you at random times, isn't it? And it was like a few weeks after this, I was talking to a girl that I used to work with who was a yoga teacher. And she said to me, look, have you ever tried this thing called fertility yoga? I have a friend who teaches it. Do you want me to put her in touch with you? I, at this stage, was not a yoga teacher. I only taught Pilates and personal training. And I was like, no, I don't think that a bit of yoga is going to help me. I've just been through another round of IVF. Look, what is a bit of yoga going to do? But being the very type A person that I am, I had tried literally everything else. So I thought, why not? I've got nothing else to do. I'll give it a go. And Naomi, without sounding too dramatic, it really changed my life amazingly. And it was little things at first. The first thing that happened was that I started to sleep. And that was life changing for anyone who's ever had insomnia for whatever reason, knows just how debilitating it is. And I would just get into bed and fall asleep. It was the biggest novelty in the world. I started to notice that when I went in for testing for my thyroid, my results would come back and they'd improved, and I hadn't changed my medication. The
wow.
only thing I had done differently was this yoga practice. And a few other things kind of happened around that time. I noticed that my cycle got a little bit longer. It had gotten a little bit short, as we were preparing for IVF. And I think that a lot of that had to do with stress levels and things like that. So my cycle lengthened out. And then in July of 2020, I fell pregnant naturally for the very first time in my life. Something that I was told over and over again was impossible, but I did it. And sadly, we lost that baby at 8 weeks.
Oh,
And as devastating as that was, it wasn't my lowest point, because
yeah.
I had stumbled across something that had been such a game changer that no one had told me about. I mean, a bit of yoga, I mean, compared to fertility treatments, like, you know, it's
Yeah.
the cheapest treatment in the world. And I just thought, I need to learn more about this, and I need to learn why it had such an impact on my body. I have an exercise science background, so I wanted to know the science. Like, why did this work, on a physiological level? So I went back and retrained as a yoga teacher, which was very humbling. It was very different to all the very science-based training I'd had previously. And I started looking at how this works for women's menstrual cycles and for hormonal health. I started employing all of these principles into my own life and my own practice. And at the very end of 2020, I fell pregnant again, naturally. And that little boy is now 3.
Oh,
So that is my journey. And yes, I still teach Pilates and it supports most of my pre and postnatal clients. But I think the yoga part is so beneficial when you're trying to conceive. So I really did a bit of a 180 in what I teach, and now that's my main focus. So that's what brings me here today.
oh, and it's so lovely to hear the whole story because I know like on Instagram we can share like little snippets and so people kind of build up this patchwork or maybe assume maybe she's gone through treatment or maybe she's gone through this or maybe she's had a loss and it's so lovely to hear your whole story and I hope people listening really take strength from that because sometimes we hear the end point. Oh, I found the thing that was the life-changing thing that changed. So I found the yoga and then I got my cycle back and I sorted out my thyroid and I got pregnant. And people hear that bit. And so they might start something and then want to get the outcome immediately. So I think it's always so helpful to hear that whole story and everything you've been through. And it wasn't like, oh, you started doing yoga and the following Tuesday you got pregnant and that was then, your forever baby that became your second child. It was like there was still things along the journey and there was still that loss. But like you said, it's like, and I was the same when I had my miscarriage. That wasn't my lowest point. My lowest point had been 2 years before where I thought there was no hope. Whereas actually,
Exactly.
once I'd been pregnant and then lost the baby, even though, it was really sad, but I didn't go back into depression and anxiety because something had changed inside of me. And I was like, whenever I say that now, I just want to burst into song. It's impossible after Wicked to say something changed within me. I just want to like I feel like we need a little musical break out there. But it's true, isn't it? When you felt that shift, and then it's like you never go back to that
Mm.
low point because inside your head is different, inside your body is different.
Mm. Oh, I so agree with that. And students ask me all the time, they're like, Jen, how did you keep the faith and the hope alive that you would get through this journey and that you would have your family? And I was 39 when I had my son. So it wasn't like things were looking great for me with all of my problems and my age put together. And I think the answer to that question is you have to start noticing the little changes that you're making because they are what adds up to this huge cumulative effect, And for me, it was these little things like, just being less miserable, being nicer to my husband, it was like just noticing these small changes that you have in your life and realize that you made those changes. Like you have all of that power within you. And I think that that is what inspired me and kept me going.
And I think that's what it is for me. The real thing when people really talk about, like when I meet someone new and there's, what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm a fertility therapist. And people are kind of like, oh, what does that even mean? Because my job isn't to get people pregnant. My
Mm,
job is to support them on their journey to get from where they are today so that yes, it improves their chances of getting pregnant, but to be able to hold that hope, to be able to keep going, to be able to make the changes that are really making a difference to their fertility.
mm,
And it's kind of really hard to explain that if someone hasn't experienced infertility or knows how hopeless and how empty and isolated you can feel, saying like, I help people recapture that hope and excitement. And people are kind of like, oh, that sounds lovely. And then someone's going through it, it's like, oh my God, yes, that's what I need. That's what I want. Give it to me.
that's so true. And when I first started teaching fertility yoga, I was thinking of this space, I'd come from such a medical place from all of the fertility treatments that I've been through, and doctors are always banging on about their success rates and your chances of a positive test and all of these things. And I thought people are going to ask me about my success rates, and I need to have an answer, and I need to be able to give people a predicted outcome. And like like that, it just isn't possible. And I don't even think it's possible from a fertility doctor, really. They
Yeah.
can't guarantee you that you have a 65% chance of falling pregnant. And what does that even mean? You are or you're
Yeah.
not. And so I have seen with the students that I've worked with some absolutely incredible stories, like things that have just floored me that you would have never thought possible. But at the same time, it was funny actually. Last month, I had 6 students who I've worked with for between 2 to 3 years. All of them fell pregnant within this 1 month. But I worked with them for
Oh,
2 to 3 years. And it's like, that was not a quick fix. That
okay.
wasn't a,
What
no,
month was that? Because
I know.
I had 3 clients who all I've been working with for 2 to 3 years. They all got pregnant in an
Oh my
8 week period.
gosh.
So if that
It,
is the
it
same
was,
period, there's something weird going on with the
it
moon
was weird. It was early November to mid-December. Something going
last
on.
last year.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. End of last year.
Oh yeah, no, mine are all having their babies
Oh,
now.
okay.
And they're
Okay.
this like little posse. But it was that thing of I think that's the thing you can't and I think that's true what you say about the doctors can't give you a figure as well because every single person is completely unique. Their physical makeup is complete, their emotional and energetic makeup is completely unique. And while I think it can be interesting to kind of look at the statistics of the like how much it can improve your chances, it's actually more about really finding the thing that clicks with you because in a way the statistics become irrelevant if you get that feeling and come back to yourself. Like, yes, it's amazing to feel like, oh, this is also helping my fertility. But there's like this deeper level of this isn't like let's just get you pregnant as quickly as possible, bing bang bosh, off you go. It's like let's get it so that when you do get pregnant, you feel amazing. You don't have the anxiety, scan anxiety of like, what if for every time. You're not living on tenterhooks. You're not like I had literally had one lady like turn off the light whenever she went to the loo like so that she couldn't see if she'd started
Oh,
bleeding. And it was like, we want to deal with all of that as well. So when you get there, you can enjoy that pregnancy rather than still being in this highly anxious state, um, you know, in like high arousal state. And yes, you could add a pregnancy in, but that isn't actually what you want. What you want is the pregnancy you've been dreaming about, where you actually go, I'm pregnant and this is amazing.
oh, and I say this to my students all the time. You don't want the positive pregnancy test. You don't want to be able to just tell people, I'm pregnant. No, you want to enjoy seeing your baby grow. You want to build a life with this little person. You want to be able to look back on your life when you're 90 and say, what an amazing thing I was able to do. And so we get so caught up in the positive pregnancy test. And I think that's where we fall down. We get so laser focused on these 2 week increments over and over and over again. And we forget about the why of why we wanted to do this in the first place. And that is where I think the things that you and I teach, and whether it is hypnosis or a yoga practice or whatever works for you, whatever gets you to that place of peace where you can appreciate the enormity of what you've been through, sure, but also enjoy the journey, honestly, because it is a short time that you get to be pregnant in the long scheme of your baby's
Yeah.
life. So you want to be able to enjoy it if you can.
And that's why I say I think sometimes because I do work with a lot of women that are, have been trying like long term trying to conceive. They've been through maybe a lot of treatment, a lot of loss. And I do say to them, it's like pregnancy is going to just go by in a flash because you've been in this for so long now that this, the fertility trying to conceive bit is so chunky, but the actual pregnancy bit is just gonna, yeah, go by so quickly. Um, And I think just going back to what you were just saying about finding the thing that allows you to connect with your peace and connect with you, but while honoring your emotions and what you've been through and what you're still going through. So this is something I've been talking about this week quite a lot with people that when you bring in the mind body techniques, it's ensuring that you're doing it the right practice with the right practitioner so that you're not gaslighting yourself. And you're not
Mm.
saying, oh, and now I meditate, or now I do yoga, or now I listen to hypnosis tracks, or work with therapists. And what I'm actually going to do is completely ignore what I'm feeling, stick a big smile on my face, and be like, I really believe, I really believe. And actually, what you do, you're just gaslighting yourself.
Mm.
And so, actually, having these techniques that allow you to go inside, really connect with how you're feeling. And sometimes that's really hard because we may feel incredibly jealous. We may then feel shame for feeling jealous of our friends who are pregnant. We then might feel really guilty for that shame. We might then isolate ourselves because it's too hard, and all these emotions. And if we just jump to the like, or the visualizing and the manifesting and the like, the connecting with the energy, but we don't address everything that comes before, we can isolate ourselves even more. And it's like even that we're lying to ourselves. So these techniques that allow you to really go, how do I really feel right now? And accept myself in the mess and in all of those emotions. That in itself is so healing.
Mm. And it's huge. And when you make that connection, your life changes. And what I would have given, obviously, the number one thing I wanted when I was trying to conceive was the baby. But the number two thing was just to have my life back, just to feel less miserable and just not be
Yeah,
consumed by this fear every moment of every single day that I wasn't going to have my family.
yeah.
And that to be able to have your life back, it's it was almost enough. It really was.
I think that's as well when sometimes, and obviously for both of us, it's quite interesting because I have to remember that my silver lining of going through infertility and IVF and loss and everything was I now have this amazing global business and support people every day and get to love what I'm doing. And sometimes I forget, it's like, because I now look back on my fertility journey, yeah, horrible when I was going through it, but it's led to who I am today and the
Mm,
life that I lead today and the freedom I have to be with my kids and to take the holidays off and have my clients work around my family. Um, and so there's part in the Embrace Fertility method where we're talking about post-traumatic growth. And this is when we
mm,
go through something incredibly traumatic, and that is the thing that kind of blows us open and then allows us to expand. But sometimes we don't realize that that's happening until a lot later. And then we look back and then we're like, oh, yes, well, that all needed to happen because of this. And obviously, for both of us, we're kind of like, well, yeah, great. I've been through that and it's led me to this beautiful, life enhancing practice that I can then share with people. And so other people are kind of like, but why am I going through this, Naomi? And I was like, we don't know. It's like coming to pieces. You might not ever know, or it might
mm,
be when your child is like a few years old that then you can look back with that perspective and go, oh wow, like I'm actually mothering now in a different way to how I would have done pre-infertility.
mm. I think about that a lot because, that's something that people say to me every day. It's just, this is so unfair. Why me? And that was exactly my thought process for many years. And no, we can't know exactly why the universe throws these things at us because it doesn't seem to discriminate with infertility. It's whoever it decides to bestow upon. But when you can just for a moment open a little crack to perhaps it is leading you somewhere better. Maybe, maybe, maybe. But I do hate saying that because if someone had said that to me while I was going
You'd
through
be a bit
IVF,
like,
I'd be like,
what?
here's a punch in the face, bro.
Yeah.
So I know that's a very hard thing to say to people.
And I think the thing is realizing that it's something that it's not like you have to come to this place of fully accepting where you are. You
Mm.
can still be pissed off. You can still be
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I want this to end. And feel that peace within yourself and that kind of, you know what, this is really hard, but I will be okay and I
Mm.
will get through it. And that
Mm.
that level of resilience, which I had like when I was going through my first fertility round, I didn't have any. I had absolutely no resilience whatsoever. I was like just, I don't know, just like this sort of leaf blowing around in a hurricane. Like I just felt so untethered and
Mm.
completely at the mercy of the treatment and the injections and the scans and all of it. And then it was when I started practicing mindfulness and hypnosis and EFT and these techniques that were allowing me to go, this is so hard, and it's okay that it's hard, and this is how I make it feel easier. That I started then, yeah, things started
Mm.
shifting. And then by the time I went through my fourth round of treatment, I was like, right, yeah, this is what we're doing, off we go. And I was like a completely different person going
Mm.
through the treatment. And it was all just how I was experiencing it, my perspective, and the way I viewed treatment. Because for the first treatment, I was so angry that I had to do treatment, that I was being like, it's like I was obviously chose to do it. No one has to do it, but it's like it felt like I didn't have a choice. I was being told by my doctors, there is no choice now. Now is the time, to
Mm.
step up and do treatment. And I delayed and delayed and delayed. So I went into it with so much anger. And it's so hard if you're going into treatment angry, because you have to be that level of resilience to be able to literally just get up and inject yourself every day, or get up and go do the scans, and to, you know, the the effort of doing it is huge. So if you're not really behind it, it can be really difficult. And I say you never have to be like 100% like, yay, going into treatment, because no one wants to do it. But if you can be 51%, yes, I am doing this, and this could be the way that I get to meet my baby and be dealing with everything that comes up, then it makes it so much easier.
I think that's all you need. And so many people will resonate with that, I think. Mm.
So tell us about the importance of coming back to your body while
Mm.
going through infertility and trying to conceive.
It's such a sort of an out, like a, woo woo kind of statement, isn't it? Coming back to your body. But it's something that I feel very strongly about, because when you are going through infertility, and especially when you go down the medical route, your body is taken away from you. You become this pincushion that's all about tests and scans and procedures and surgeries. And you're literally a test dummy. We don't know what's going to work. We're throwing spaghetti at the walls sometimes. And you lose sight of what your body really wants and needs at each stage. And we can't really wake up in the morning and say, well, my body doesn't want to do injections today, but you're in the middle of an IVF cycle. That's not
Yeah.
what I mean. What I mean is, yes, we have to go through all of these things, but we don't have to be completely at the mercy of someone else. If something doesn't feel right in our gut and your body is having a reaction, and everyone can know how this feels. You have a physical reaction to something where you just, your body just doesn't want to go into that room or be around that person. And we completely lose sight of that. And we also lose trust in our bodies as well, especially if we've been through loss or recurrent loss. It becomes really, really hard to think that our bodies are capable of carrying a pregnancy. So I think that we need to come back to ourselves on a somatic level. And somatic means within the body, because it's not something that we're taught to do. And no fertility doctor is going to be telling you to do this. So that's what I mean by coming back to your body. And we can do this in a variety of different ways. I like to get my students to start with 5 minutes a day, sit somewhere quiet, close your eyes, and focus on your breath. And just coming into that silence and that place where you don't have to be anywhere, you don't have to think about anything, you don't have to go anywhere, and just see what comes up. And I find when I do this, I'm amazed if I really tune into my body, the things that it tells me. And that might sound really woo woo and really out there, but you know, I have not been trying to conceive for many years now. And this is still something that I do because I trust my body so intuitively now because of this practice that I started when I was trying to conceive. So I think that that is really the very first step.
I think it's so important because that then leads into regulating our body. And there's a huge amount, sort of over the past 12 months, especially on Instagram, of talking about the vagus nerve, talking about dysregulation, talking about rebalancing our nervous system. So, from my point of view, I share a lot of the studies and the background and the research, but behind the mind body link. So when I trained in cognitive hypnotherapy. It's all based on the research, and it's very grounded in this is what has been proven to change our body. And then we're kind of adding in the more spiritual and energetic sort of levels within my work. But I love coming back to these baseline studies. And as we gain more and more understanding of how the body works, because my very first question when I was going through it, well, is my stress causing my infertility? Because even my doctor was telling me, oh, you're too stressed. If you just relax, it'll happen. And this was even though I had a diagnosis of endometriosis that I'd had as a teen. I was being told by my doctor that I was too stressed. So I just took that on as this is now my fault. This is I'm too stressed. Therefore I must go and relax. And obviously if you tell
Mm.
a really stressed person to relax, it doesn't make them more relaxed. It makes them even more stressed. So it was then when I went and actually learned how to manage my stress, how to overcome my stress. But it was still this ongoing question of, well, now I'm not as stressed, I'm still not getting pregnant. Am I still, all the things. So the studies basically show that it's really not as simple. It's not like if you're stressed you can't get pregnant. Of course that's not true. You can be incredibly stressed, get pregnant. Of course you can. There probably wouldn't be any humans on this planet if that was the case. But stress does impact our hormones, our ovulation, like all the behaviors we have that then support our fertility, etc., etc. So talk to us about regulating the nervous system and how this can really impact us, not just on a physical level, but emotional level as well.
Mm. That I love that you touched on the science and the woo woo a little bit there because these practices that you and I teach, they are the ultimate blend of that. And that's what initially drew me to becoming a yoga teacher. It's one of those complementary therapies that has been extensively studied in Western medicine and has been used in PTSD recovery and curing anxiety and depression and all of these things. So we know that it works. But why? Why does it work and how does it work in your body? And that's what I wanted to know. So, when we're talking about nervous system dysregulation, we're basically talking about being hypervigilant and in a state, low level, sometimes a high level, of fight or flight or freeze for most of your day. And the problem is that if you are stressed about your next treatment cycle not being successful or your transfer isn't going to work or whatever part of the fertility journey is stressing you out, your brain doesn't understand that there's a difference between that and there's a tiger in the next room and he's going to find me and eat me in a few minutes. Your brain doesn't know that there's a difference. Your nervous system can't see and it can't hear. It only senses danger. So when we have been on this journey for a long period of time, our brain thinks that we are in a constant state of survival mode. What happens to our body is actually pretty not conducive to pregnancy. So if you think about it, if you are running for your life away from a tiger, what do you need to survive? You need to run bloody fast, or you need to be able to hide and freeze, or, oh, look, you're probably not going to fight a tiger because you're not going to win. But these are the things you need. So, in order to do that, your body goes, okay, we're going to shut down all of the non essential things that we don't need for immediate survival. And we're going to send all of our energy and blood flow into getting ready to run or to hide, not fight. So, things that are not essential for immediate survival are things like digestion. You don't have to digest your lunch if you are running for your life. That can wait. We don't need to solve a maths problem or win at a chess game. So that kind of higher order critical thinking, that part of the brain literally shuts down. And you can see on brain scans when people are high in cortisol that part of the brain just is not lit up. So we don't think properly. The other thing that happens is we don't need to reproduce when we're running for our lives. So your brain says, oh, might put that on hold. Don't really need to worry about ovulation. And so if you are pumping out cortisol and adrenaline and these stress hormones day after day, month, years even at a time, your brain doesn't think this is a great time to conceive.
Yeah.
And you're right, Naomi, absolutely. Like women fall pregnant every day who are in stressful situations, in war zones, in difficult relationships. We know this. No, stress is not the thing that's going to stop you from getting pregnant, but it can make it a lot harder.
Yeah.
And the thing that I always come back to is that it makes your life miserable. Digestive
Yeah.
issues, you've got brain fog all the time, your cycle goes haywire. I have students who come to me after a year or two of going through infertility, and they'll say, look, I used to have a really normal cycle, 28 days, I'd ovulate in the middle, periods super regular. A year or two into fertility treatments, their cycle is all over the place. They don't know when they're ovulating. Their luteal phase is short. Sometimes they miss a period. And a lot of this has to do with the interruption of all of those beautiful hormonal, reproductive hormones that have to be in this sort of dance with each other. Stress interrupts that. And we can go more into the science of it, but I think that's probably enough for people to understand that, when you aren't in that state of regulation, we call it the parasympathetic state of rest and digest, where your brain goes, oh, it is safe. I have plenty of food to eat. I don't need to rush anywhere. I'm at a place where everything is looking healthy and safe. That is a great time to conceive. So your brain goes, okay, maybe we can start producing a bit more progesterone. We don't need the cortisol so much anymore. That's where I think changes start to happen. And I'm in my early 40s now, and I continue these regulating practices every day. My cycle is better now than it has ever been in my life. And, that doesn't make any sense, according to my hormone levels from 10 years ago. So I think that you have a lot of control and a lot of power over your body on a physiological level.
And it's so fascinating, isn't it, that the so much of what we how we respond, so much of what's happening to us, we think that we then don't what's the word? Things happen to us and we just respond. And when you learn that how you react, how you respond is something that you can actually support yourself with and build up your resilience so that these incredibly stressful things can happen. So I think for both of us as well, when we had our miscarriages, because we had these beautiful techniques to fall back on, our resilience level was so much higher. So instead
Mm.
of it being, oh, this thing has happened that's out of our control, and then we're making it mean, oh my god, what if I always miscarry? Oh my god, what if I'm not capable of having a we could have gone down that track, but because we had these practices to come back to, of listening to our body and getting quiet and going inside and being like, well, what does this mean? All this means is this particular pregnancy wasn't meant to be. That's all that it means. And so being in the present moment and being able to deal with the things that are coming in, and like you said, it's like a daily practice. This isn't just, so I did I posted a reel a while back saying I don't want you to just regulate, because so much of what's on the internet is like, oh, regulate, 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 regulate. But if you're not dealing with the stress that's meaning you're unregulated, so it's not like you're unregulated every day because of everyday life. Oh, and then you regulate back to zero. Unregulated
Mm.
zero. What we want to do is get you balanced so you're staying balanced and be allowing you to expand into. So, like you said, your hormones are in this beautiful dance because you're not just regulating and then you feel fine for an hour and then you go back into a really high stress life for 23 hours and then you're like, it's all right, I'm going to spend an hour meditating tomorrow morning, everything will be fine. I was like, if you're only re-regulating
Mm.
the dysregulation, that's the word, isn't it, and not taking it to that next level of um, so a practice, I think as well, the difference between if you desperately need a practice and then you do it and you feel that you've brought yourself back to neutral, or you do a practice and then you feel like, oh, I feel like I've been at spa for a week. I literally feel like I'm floating through life. Like you said, the main thing when you said about being nicer to your husband, that was so huge for me. It was literally like suddenly stop wanting to just punch him in the face for absolutely no reason. I was like, wow, I've been holding a lot of resentment towards him. And actually, now I'm meditating daily. I was like, how are you? And could kind of meet him back on level ground.
Yeah. Isn't that is such a good point? This idea of no, we don't just want to re-regulate ourselves because, stress is actually not a bad thing. We wouldn't survive as a species without our stress reactions, right? And we need it. Like if you're crossing the road and a car comes out of nowhere, you're not going to be like cruising across the road all in your regulated parasympathetic nervous system being
Yeah.
like, that car's cool. No, you're going to run out of the way
I'm
and like
resilient enough to take a crash, happy to take a hit. It'd be fine. No, don't go looking for the stress.
exactly. So we need like acute stress is totally fine. Like we have to respond like all other mammals do. They respond and then they come back to a state of regulation and then they go back about their day until there's another stressful incident. And they're able to re-regulate so easily. But the problem with humans is that because we have such good memories and we're obviously highly evolved, we get stuck in a stress response from thoughts. And that's something that other animals can't do. And that is what sends us on a spiral. So when something does happen, it's not just like a great example of this is when I was going through IVF, I had an acupuncture appointment one day, rocked up, they didn't have my appointment for whatever reason, got it mixed up. The normal response to that would be like, oh, okay, disappointed, let's find a time. No, I responded by having what can only be described as an adult tantrum. I was crying on the floor. They had to bring me water. Like it was ridiculous. It was a whole scene. They didn't know what was wrong. I was like, I don't know, through IVF. Like that's not a normal response to that kind of a situation. And that's what happens when you don't get yourself back to a place of regulation. You're just re-regulating from those stressful situations. You don't actually get yourself into a place where you can handle the next bit of stress. So what I try to tell my students is don't do your practices when you're stressed. Do them when you feel good, because that's when you get to bring it down that sort of deeper level. And that's where your body really starts to respond, I think, as well.
And that's when you get to really enjoy it as well. Because I think with a lot of these practices, you might do it once, twice, 7 times, even for a few weeks, and be like, I feel the
Mm,
same. Like
yeah.
nothing is because what I wanted meditation to be, that I would sit down and I would close my eyes and basically press a switch in my brain that just went, shut up. And I wanted it to mute my brain. And I wanted to be, people describe how they go into this like, I just feel so at peace when I'm meditating and there's just silence. I was like, oh my God, that is what I want. I want silence in my head because my head is like continuously 24/7. That's what I wanted it to be. And then when it wasn't that, I was really disappointed. And I was like, oh, I can't meditate properly. Like, this isn't working. This is taking too long. And then for me, it was when I found EFT to actually work with my thoughts and change the thoughts. Then I
Mm,
realized that actually what I needed wasn't silence in my head. It was the little bitchy voice going, meh, 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 what if you never have a baby? It's all your fault. You're too stressed. That voice, if I could quiet and remove that voice, then it was okay. And then it was fine to have this voice because it wasn't basically being a complete biatch in my
mm,
ear the whole day long. And so many, like I said, with these practices, you practice and then you keep practicing and you keep practicing. And then you get to the stage that they become part of you. So I say with my members, I say, what I want it to be is that if you're not doing your practice, and that, it could be meditation, it could be EFT, it could be listening to hypnosis, it could be journaling, whatever it is. I want it that if you don't do it, it feels like you haven't brushed your teeth. And you feel like,
mm,
oh, I feel a bit like, oh, there's something I've missed today. There's something that just feels a bit off. And then you feel a bit off until you go and do it. And
mm,
so the practice then becomes that. So then if you miss this practice, you're a bit like, oh, it's feel a bit scrunchy in my mind because I haven't done the thing that helps my mind feel, the way I want it to feel.
mm. I think that habit forming is the key to actually making a difference for after you get that positive pregnancy test, isn't it? Because you're like, oh, I did the yoga, I got the positive pregnancy test. Cool, I'm good to go.
Yeah, ditch
No,
that.
you're still going to be miserable. Like, sure, you're going to be pregnant, but you're going to be, turning off the light when you go to the toilet. You're going to
Yeah.
be like dying on the inside until you get to your next scan. No, that's not what you want. You want to be able to enjoy your pregnancy. So you're right. It is when these practices become habitual that things really change.
And what's the difference between fertility yoga and regular yoga? So if someone's already practicing yoga, but it's not specific to fertility, why is then moving across to fertility yoga at this time the best thing?
Such a good question. So look, fertility yoga is not some fancy kind of new yoga that I or anyone else has invented. We take practices from restorative, from hatha, from vinyasa practices, and we combine them in a way that works with the menstrual cycle. And that's what makes it different. So you're not going to be going and doing, a high energy vinyasa yoga flow every day of your cycle. What we want to do is look at where the body is at and what your body and your hormones need on an energetic level. So, for example, during menstruation, this is where your energy and your hormone levels are at their lowest. So, this is not a time to be getting up at 6 a.m., going to the gym, pushing yourself. Here's where we lean into rest, and our restorative yoga practice is so beautiful at this time of the month. And restorative yoga, for anyone who isn't aware, is literally laying around on pillows. That is what it is. And and I really struggled with this when I first came to fertility yoga because as someone who was an athlete growing up, I approached exercise as well, it has to be hard. I have to be exhausted afterwards. Otherwise, it's been a waste of my time. But that's what we need to get our heads out of when we're talking about a fertility practice. Leaning into rest is one of the most beneficial things you can do. When do you take time out of your day to actually rest, without playing on your phone, without being distracted by something else? So that's where we want to start with menstruation. Then, as your bleed starts to lighten and you move into the follicular phase and up to ovulation, your energy and your hormone levels are increasing. And ideally, as you get to ovulation, you've got lots of energy. You have great libido. You want to go out and socialize. And if any of these things aren't happening, it's a sign that your hormone levels aren't really in sync with each other. So we don't really want those more restful practices at this stage of the cycle. We want to work with that energy, keep that blood flow and circulation going, and get the hormones moving to where they need to go. So blood is your body's delivery system for hormones and nutrients, right? So we work with that. Then after ovulation, two things are going to happen. Obviously, we're either going to be pregnant or we're not. But either way, if you're not pregnant, your hormone levels are going to start to drop and then you'll bleed again. If you are pregnant, your body is gearing up to do the biggest thing it has ever done in its life. So, in both scenarios, again, we want to scale back what we're doing in terms of intensity. Yes, we still want to keep good blood flow going to allow those hormones to circulate. Obviously, keep those detox pathways open so that progesterone and estrogen are balanced. But, it's not a time to be going for, HIIT workouts and high intensity runs and hot yoga and all of these, things that I used to love that weren't conducive to my fertility journey. So that's where we don't go completely back into those restful poses, but we do incorporate a lot of them. A more slow flow movement, but mindful, gentle. And that's how fertility yoga works. We just work with what the body needs at each phase. And on top of that, we can look at different hormonal issues that a woman might have, like PCOS or endometriosis or low AMH, whatever it might be. And there are particular poses that can help for each of these different conditions. And that's quite personalized and individual. So it's something you would really want to work with a practitioner on. But that's what makes it different. And that's what makes it so beautiful. It gives you permission just to live in sync with your cycle and listen to your body. It's just the best.
And I think that was like one of the massive changes for me, that because I'd been diagnosed with endometriosis as a teen, and I was so used to powering through my period. So I basically just, take a load of painkillers, have one of those heat patches that you stick on your pants, off you go. And I would just power through. And I worked for a very male orientated business, where there was, I think only 10% of the workforce was female. And so it was very, you don't slow down
Mm.
every 4 weeks. It's just like go, go, go. And then when I was trying to conceive, it was like coming to this new relationship with my body that was like, oh, actually, my cycle is something to be celebrated, because if you don't have a cycle, you can't get pregnant. You don't get the chance to even try. And that was a massive shift for me, that I was like, oh, I get to slow down during this week. And especially because with long term trying to conceive, because I was then obviously like really depressed and upset that I wasn't pregnant, I was being like emotionally slowed down instead of slowing down because physically that's what my body was asking for. And so I really shifted that. And what I started doing was, on those mornings at the start of my cycle, I would start work an hour later. I would get up, I would have an Epsom salt bath, I would have a light breakfast, I would, drink hot lemon. I would ease into the day. And it meant that I then wasn't having to take the painkillers, because I was using natural techniques. I was then using hypnosis techniques to manage pain as well. And it was such a shift. And then when I
Mm,
look back to how I was, basically the messages I was giving to my body when I was just powering through, and I was basically saying, like, you don't get to rest, you don't get to
mm,
slow down, even though, and I've had periods like so bad that I've like thrown up and passed out and thought I was going to have to ring emergency, like really bad. And I thought that's just how it was always going to be. And then with changing my relationship with my body, with acupuncture, with yoga, with all the things that we do. And remember the first period I had that just arrived without any
mm.
cramps or any pain. And I literally was like, why is there blood in my pants? I literally was like, why is there blood in my pants? Like, oh my God. And I was like a little kid, like when you get your period for the first time, you're like, oh. And I literally was like, why is that there? And I was like, oh my God, is that my period? Because there'd been no cramping, there'd been no tension, there'd been no all, the 85 symptoms that I used to have in the run up to the actual bleed. And I was just like, that is huge, that my body has changed so much, that I'm literally shocked, when also shocked because I wasn't, normally I was literally like so aware of I might be pregnant. So then the arrival was a negative shock. But this was
Mm.
literally a kind of like a like just surprise of like, what is that? Oh, right, it's my cycle.
Oh, I resonate so much with that. And that's what I love, all of these things you're talking about. You did that with your mind. And how powerful is that? We are the best pharmacy that the world has ever invented. Our brains are a pharmacy. And when we can switch on what needs to happen and work with our bodies, honestly, like I hear stories like that all the time, and it never ceases to amaze me. And you realize how capable we are of making change.
And how often should people be practicing, and how can they get started? Because I'm sure if anyone is listening to this and isn't having the thought, well, I need to immediately start practicing fertility yoga. So how can they go about doing that? And what can that look like, you know, in their life to become this beautiful, supportive habit?
I don't want people to think they have to suddenly go and do like an hour yoga class every day, right? Because the last thing I would want to do is add more to someone's plate when they're trying to conceive. But I like to look at it as, where can you take some time back for yourself? And that's what I think I started with. And I just fell in love with it, that beautiful sense of peace that it gave me. And I extended the time more and more. So the practices that I teach start from 10 minutes a day. So what I say to my students is, 3 times a week, come to your yoga mat. If you've only got 10 minutes, put on the 10-minute practice. See how you feel. But yoga is not just about what you see on the mat. Yoga has actually got 8 limbs or 8 parts that make up the whole practice. And the other limbs are things like meditation, breath work, how you treat yourself, how you treat others. So I like to incorporate these yogic practices throughout the day, every day. Even if it's something like, you're driving to work, and whenever you're at a red light, that's your reminder to do some breath work. And it can be as simple as a slow, deep breath in through the nose with a really slow, gentle exhale through the mouth. If you do that 4 or 5 times, you literally change the physiology in your body within a moment. And if you do that regularly enough, it is that cumulative impact that has such power to change, your body, your mindset, and how you feel. So that's what I say to my students. Like, let's start with actually getting out the yoga mat, say 3 times a week, even if you've only got 10 minutes, and then let's build in these little moments of time throughout the day. Getting started, I think really, you can't go to a yoga studio and say, hey, I've been trying to conceive for a year. Can you work with my cycle? Like, it's unfortunately, it's not widespread training. It's very specialized. And I think you really do need to work with someone who understands how to modify the practices for each phase of the cycle. And especially if you're going through treatments, fertility treatments, we need to modify them even more. So if someone is listening to this and they don't know where to start, then I would invite them to come and join me at the end of this month. I'm going to be running a free 3-day live practice where you can start learning more about these beautiful tools and how they can help you. You'll have a chance to come and ask all your questions, and I will show you how simple and easy and gentle these practices are, because there are no handstands. There are no twisting into pretzel shapes throughout these sessions. It is really just about reconnecting you with your body and your breath. And so that would be where I would love for you to start.
Fantastic. And I love that that's an offering that I really encourage everyone listening to take Jen up on this offer and to just come. And even if you're skeptical, even if maybe you've tried yoga before and it wasn't for you, this sounds like it's very different, and it's designed for this different time in your life. So come and enjoy. If people are listening to this after your free classes, what's the best step for them then?
Absolutely. So jump on my website, which is elementpilatesyoga.com, or my Instagram. You can Google just the same Google, sorry, you can search within Instagram the same element, and you will see all of my offerings there. So you can work with me one-on-one if you want to. I have online courses available. I will be opening up my group coaching program at the start of February, which will follow this free live series. So if people are listening to this around the end of Jan or beginning of Feb and they'd like to come and work a little bit more closely, then I would love to have you join me for that. So reach out, send me an email if you're not sure, but I have lots of free offerings and lots of ways in which you can get started.
Fantastic. And I'm going to include all of the details and the links below in the show notes. And yes, I encourage you all to reach out to Jen on Instagram. Let us know what you thought about this episode, any and all questions. Just give us a shout. We're both on Instagram regularly, so that's a great place to come and connect. Thank you so much, Jen, for today. It's been an amazing, so informative and so inspiring. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Naomi. It's been such a treat.
Mhm. And if you haven't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button to be the first to know when the next episode goes live. And if you're not already on my mailing list, come over to embracefertility.co.uk and sign up for my 3-minute fertility reset MP3 and to be the first to know when episodes go live.